You came for a flower? In the ashes of war, a Terran and a princess made a choice that changed everything. Valakar did not declare war. They didn't send envoys or deliver ultimatums carved in gold. They simply arrived in the dead of night without warning, like wolves into a sleeping camp. Epsilon's skies, once filled with slow-moving merchant ships and glowing navigation buoys, burned crimson as orbital assault carriers pierced through the upper atmosphere. In just 48 hours, the western granaries of Valen, the vital port city of Kareth, and the War Academy in Sector 12 had all fallen. Why now? Valakar waited for the planetary equinox, when energy grids diverted power to sacred obelisks during ancient ceremonies. This left defense systems exposed, and they struck with brutal precision. For every one soldier Epsilon could field, Valakar had four, not men, drones, tanks with insect legs, hybrid troopers with steel beneath their skin, and voices stripped of emotion. Epsilon fought with honor. Valakar fought to erase, yet the people did not surrender, because they still had her. Princess Alicia, not a porcelain figure draped in velvet, but a commander in battle-worn armor, her jet-black hair tied tight behind her head. At 26, she'd led more sorties than most generals. Her armor was engraved with the phoenix of House Solari, a symbol not just of royalty, but survival. Soldiers followed her because she fought beside them. Civilians wept when she visited the wounded. When her council begged her to retreat to the eastern citadel, she refused. "If I run," she said, "who will stay?" At the northern cliff fortress of Thandur, she led the defense personally. The Valakari assault came under cover of synthetic fog, jamming signals and turning sensors blind. Then came the spider tanks, burrowed for weeks, erupting from beneath the ground. Elysia gave commands calmly through static. "Hold the corridor, aim for the joints, do not break formation." But at Uru 317, a missile breached the western wall. She shielded two cadets, absorbing the blast herself. Blood pooled. Her armor shattered, and with her fall, panic spread like wildfire. The Valakari general, Sith Rakin, saw the moment and moved in. By dawn, Thandur was rubble, and the northern line, Epsilon's last true defense, had collapsed. But someone found her in that smoke, dragged her out, and that changed everything. Smoke still curled upward from the ruins of Thandur when Caden knelt beside the dying princess. She was barely conscious. Blood matted her side. Breathing shallow, armor split along her ribs. Her lips moved in silent protest, eyes blinking slow against the ash. Around them, the battlefield groaned with the heat of aftermath. Metal twisted, fires crackled, and distant cries echoed through the hollow canyons. Caden had seen worse, but not by much. He wasn't what they expected of Earthborn mercenaries. No bionic limbs, no chrome eyes. He wore matte gray exo-armor patched from a dozen systems, his helmet stripped down to reveal a weathered, angular face, tanned from sun, jaw peppered with stubble, dark eyes constantly scanning. A jagged scar cut from temple to cheek, a souvenir from a siege in Sirius IV. His pulse rifle, custom forged, rested on his back. On his hip, a worn leather pouch. Inside, a folded paper map with one word scribbled, Snowblossom. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not in the middle of someone else's war. But the moment his scanner picked up a faint bio signal beneath the collapsed tower, he moved without thinking. "Still breathing," he muttered, checking her vitals. "Stubborn one, huh?" He hoisted her over his shoulder, ducking through rubble, weaving between collapsed beams and the charred remains of Epsilonian banners. Above, Valakar drones still scanned for survivors. One passed within 8 meters. Caden didn't flinch. He slipped between shadows like a ghost, carrying royalty like she weighed nothing. By the time Alicia awoke, she was in a makeshift med shelter buried into a ravine. Her vision blurred. Pain flared in her side. Then, a shadow leaning over her, pressing a cold patch to her wound. "Don't move," the voice said. Deep, steady, human. She reacted instantly, hands shooting up to his throat. Her grip was weak, but her eyes blazed with fury. "Who are you?" she rasped. Caden didn't resist. He simply looked down at her, unfazed. Name's Caden. Earthborn. Mercenary. You're lucky I was nearby. Her brow furrowed. Earth? The Terran system? That's a dead rumor. Yeah, we're good at being rumors. He smirked, gently easing her back. Now stop trying to strangle me before I finish stitching your lung shut. She narrowed her eyes. Why did you help me? You were bleeding out under a tower. I figured you wouldn't appreciate dying without a sarcastic Terran nearby. Despite herself, a twitch of amusement tugged her lips. She didn't smile, but she didn't resist either. Still, the silence between them lingered like static, thick, suspicious. Elysia finally asked, You fight for Epsilon? No, Caden replied plainly. I fight for payment, but sometimes I fight because it feels wrong not to. It wasn't a heroic answer, and maybe that's why it disarmed her. Later, when her strength returned, she demanded to know why he'd come to Panka. A lone mercenary on a planet consumed by war was either mad or suicidal, or both. Caden reached into his satchel, pulling out a folded sketch. It showed a white flower blooming from an ice-locked stem, the Snowblossom. You came for a flower? She asked, incredulous. It's not just a flower, he said. They say it grows once every century in the mountains north of here. Said to grant strength, clarity, maybe even something beyond. And you believe that? He shrugged. I've seen worse legends come true. Elysia chuckled, dry, bitter, amused. You're risking your life for fairy tales, while my world burns. Caden looked her dead in the eyes. Then maybe we both have something worth chasing. And just like that, something unspoken passed between them. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. The morning after Elysia regained full consciousness, the fortress physicians declared her stable. Her wounds, though deep, were healing. But the greater wound, it turned out, was political. Within hours, word had reached the capital. The princess' lives. But that wasn't the only news spreading like wildfire through the war-battered corridors of Estrella. She was rescued by a Terran. The lawkeepers were swift. According to Epsilon's law of binding blood, established during the reign of Queen Moralia 300 years prior, any non-citizen who saved the life of a royal must be granted protection, sanctuary, and, if unmarried, be offered the royal's hand in union. The law was archaic, ceremonial at best, but still binding. Originally created to prevent betrayal, to turn potential assassins into protectors, it had not been invoked in over a century, and certainly never in the midst of open war. Now, with half the kingdom under siege and the royal line reduced to a single heir, the law had been triggered by a man not of Epsilon, but of Earth. In the war chamber, voices rose like thunder. A Terran! He could be a spy! It is the law, she must honor it. She cannot marry a foreign blade while our sons die in trenches. Elysia sat at the center of it all, her armor still stained with blood, face pale but unmoved. I owe him a debt, she said, not my future. Silence. Then murmurs. Shock, disapproval. You would defy the high law? One minister hissed. Defy 3 centuries of tradition? Yes, Elysia replied coldly. If tradition demands I chain myself to a man I barely know. She stood then, still weak, still favoring her wounded side, but her voice never wavered. Make no mistake, I owe Caden my life. I grant him sanctuary. I grant him respect. But my heart and crown are not for trade. Outside the council chamber, Caden leaned against a column, arms crossed. He had overheard enough. You know, he said as she passed him, I wasn't planning on proposing. Elysia didn't break stride. Good. I would have said no. He chuckled. Guess we're off to a great start. That night they found themselves alone again. This time not in battle, but in thought. She sat sharpening a blade. He nursed a cup of bitter moonleaf brew. The tent glowed dimly with the warmth of distant lanterns. You think marriage is a joke? She asked suddenly. No, he said. I think it's a trap. But I've seen worse prisons. Her eyes flicked to him. I'm not a prize, Caden. Didn't say you were. Silence. Then she asked, what do you fight for, really? He looked down into his drink. Survival. Coin. Occasionally guilt. That's not honor. No, he agreed. But it's honest. She frowned, setting the blade aside. I was raised to believe in duty, in loyalty, in dying for something greater. And how's that working out for you? That stung. Her face tightened. But then he added, you're still here, still bleeding. So maybe it's not all lies. Their eyes met across the flickering light. Not agreement, but recognition. They came at dusk, not from the sky, but from beneath the ground. The second Valakari offensive struck Estrella with surgical brutality. No warning, no orbital bombardment, just silence, until the sewers exploded. Estrella was the jewel of Epsilon, its capital and heartbeat. Its streets were carved in white stone, its towers laced with energy veins that pulsed like a living thing. To strike it was to wound the soul of the nation. So why now? Because Valakar knew Epsilon had funneled everything to the front. Every battalion, every ship, every trained soldier. Estrella was guarded by ceremonial sentinels. 5,000 elite but underdeployed, stretched thin across 32 districts. The Royal Guard, the Ember Corps, and remnants of the 7th Infantry were scrambled in the first 15 minutes. But it was chaos. Civilians clogged the evacuation routes. Plasma fire lit the skies. Valakari saboteurs in mimic armor moved like shadows through the alleyways. Within the first hour, District 4 burned. Hospitals overwhelmed. Power nodes severed. A quarter of the city plunged into darkness. Panic became an enemy more lethal than bullets. Elysia watched from the central command tower, hands clenched behind her back, fury dancing in her eyes. We underestimated them, General Corps said through gritted teeth. No, she replied. We underestimated someone inside. But she said no more. In the war room, Caden stood apart, silent, studying holographic troop movements. He had seen this before. Not on Panka, on Ganymede. Same pattern, same misdirection. They're hurting you, he said suddenly. The generals turned. Excuse me, barked Commander Varos. They're not attacking at random. They're channeling your forces into choke points, thinning the lines. You're playing their game. And what would a Terran mercenary know of our wars? Varos sneered. Caden approached the table and tapped a ridge on the map. They'll strike here next. Tunneling route beneath the water station. They'll cut supply lines and flank from behind. You have no proof. I have experience. Take it or die with your pride. Elysia stepped in. Enough. Prepare the Ember Corps. Follow his strategy. And they did. What followed was swift, brutal, and, to Valakar, utterly unexpected. Caden had lured the enemy into a feigned retreat, then detonated their forward tunnel using ion grenades synced to vibration sensors. When the Valakari broke formation in confusion, the Ember Corps rained down from hover barges with incendiary bursts. In 26 minutes, the eastern flank was retaken. Elysia watched from a command drone feed, silent. Your Terran saved half the city, Corps said. No, she replied. He bought us time. That's more dangerous than saving lives. Because now people listen to him. Caden's name echoed in the halls. Whispers of the Terran tactician crept into council meetings. Some called him a gift, others a threat. But while eyes turned to Caden, Elysia's gaze turned inward. Why had Valakar known the exact sewer paths? Why had the guard rotations been changed the night before? She studied the council with fresh eyes. Minister Halwyn stammered during a report, a man once known for unwavering poise. Advisor Talia, her childhood tutor, had started asking very specific questions about troop placement. Elysia filed it all away, silent, and she told no one, not even Caden, because if a traitor sat within the circle of her trust, the only way to catch them was to let them think they were winning. They were trapped for 6 days. After the siege of Estrella, a secondary Valakari strike collapsed the southern quarter of the city. Elysia and Caden had been inspecting a field barracks when the blast came. The ceiling crumbled. The world turned red. Dust, steel, and silence. Now they shared a buried shelter no wider than 3 meters, lit by the soft blue of a portable lantern. Outside, drones still searched. The air was stale. Oxygen recycled. No comms. Just 2 people breathing in sync. Strangers, yet something more. Elysia had grown quiet after the 4th hour, not withdrawn, watchful. She studied Caden while he calibrated a laser cutter from scavenged parts. His focus was absolute. When her bandages came loose, he reset them with surprising gentleness. When she drifted into half-sleep, he stood guard without complaint. She noticed the little things. He always handed her the warmest ration pack. Never took first watch. Always scanned the shelter 3 times before resting. On the second night, she asked, "Why do you keep doing that?" Caden didn't look up. Doing what? Acting like someone who still gives a damn. He shrugged. Because I still do. Silence again. Then she spoke. I had a sister, she said quietly. Her name was Kalis, older by 2 years, smarter, kinder. Everyone thought she'd be queen. What happened? Caden asked, voice low. She sold our border protocols to Valakar, Alicia said flatly. 10 years ago. Said she did it for peace. Caden paused. Did it work? Alicia's mouth twisted. No, they used it to wipe out 3 colonies. Then they sent her back, piece by piece. She didn't cry. Her voice didn't even shake. But the shadows under her eyes deepened, not from sleeplessness, from memory. I was 14, she continued, and from that day, I swore I'd never compromise justice again, never trust betrayal, not even for love. Caden said nothing. What could he? Later, he broke the silence with his own story. I fought on Titan, he said. Earth's moon, not your gas giant. The ice wars, corporate hell. No flags, no nations. Just mercs and machines. Why leave? He looked down at his gloved hands. Because I shot a 10-year-old. Thought he was wired with a bomb. He wasn't. Alicia stared at him. No judgment. Just presence. You don't have to carry that forever, she said quietly. I don't intend to, he answered. That's why I'm here. She nodded. They sat in silence, side by side, backs against cold stone. Somewhere above, the world raged. But in that small moment, beneath rubble and ruin, something else stirred. Not love, not yet, but trust. Fragile, real, and it terrified them both. The message came on the 4th night, scrambled, blood-soaked, and 10 hours too late. A Valakari strike force had bypassed Epsilon's western sentry nets and descended upon outpost LSR, one of the last forward command bases left holding the frontier. 3 battalions were stationed there, the Iron Crest, the Ember Talons, and the 22nd Sky Riders. Combined, they made up nearly 1/3 of Epsilon's remaining offensive strength. All gone. 4,000 soldiers, gone in 93 minutes. The courier drone that delivered the report was scorched black, half its memory corrupted. But the fragments were enough. Screams, blurred footage, plasma fire raining like lightning, then static. Alicia read the transmission with silent fury. Her jaw clenched so hard her teeth bled. Beside her, Caden read it once, then walked away, his silence a kind of mourning. How did this happen? She demanded of the intelligence chief. They used false transponders, he stammered. Our systems read them as friendly units. We had no warning. Because someone inside gave them the codes, she snapped. Don't you see that? The War Council fell into stunned quiet. No one dared argue. She stood, fists trembling at her sides. Her voice dropped into a low, dangerous tone. I want retribution, immediate. Full mobilization. We strike their northern camps with cryoflares. Burn the valley. Leave nothing. Gasps filled the chamber. Even General Kor's face went pale. Princess, that valley houses over 500 civilians. They're sympathizers at best, she roared. If they harbor the enemy, they die with them. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Caden spoke, calm but cutting. No, Alicia turned, eyes wide with disbelief. You forget yourself. I remember too well, he said, stepping forward. You're angry. You should be, but you're not thinking. This isn't justice. It's bloodlust. You would protect them? I would protect you from becoming the thing you fight. For a long breath, they stared at each other, the heat between them sharper than any blade. And then, slowly, her shoulders fell. The fire in her gaze dimmed, replaced by exhaustion. She looked away, then sat, collapsing more than lowering herself. That night, Alicia didn't eat, didn't speak. She stood alone in the observatory, gazing at the broken lights of Estrella's skyline. Ash still floated through the air like black snow. Her hands trembled, not from fear, from everything she was trying not to feel. Caden found her there. No words, no orders. He simply walked to her side and wrapped his arms around her. It was the first time he touched her without tension, without purpose, just presence. She didn't resist. She didn't stiffen. She let herself lean into him, forehead resting against his shoulder, breath slow and uneven. "I'm not made for this," she whispered. "Yes, you are," he said softly. "That's what terrifies them." And for a moment, there was no war, no throne, just a broken woman held by a man who saw her as human before anything else. The mountains waited in silence. Alicia had read about the northern spine, a range of jagged peaks draped in permafrost and perpetual storm. Few made the journey. Fewer returned. Locals called it the White Hollow, where the sun never touched the ground and shadows whispered in languages no one dared to translate. That was where the Snowblossom grew, if it grew at all. It took them 3 days to reach the base. They rode an old dual tread crawler, its shell reinforced with heat plating, stolen from a derelict mining convoy. Supplies were minimal, no escort, no royal guard, no drones. Alicia had insisted. "The fewer eyes on us, the safer we are," she said, adjusting the thermal regulator on her breastplate. Caden didn't argue. He rarely did when she was that certain. But as the crawler rumbled into the thinning air, up toward terrain laced with black ice and creaking avalanche veins, he glanced at her and muttered, "Remind me again why I'm the crazy one?" The wind up there could peel skin from metal. At night, they slept in a collapsible shelter, pressed against the frozen rock, breath-forming crystals midair. On the second evening, as they crouched beside a small thermal fire, Caden finally spoke. "You ever ask why I need the flower?" Alicia looked up. Her cheeks were red from cold, but her eyes remained sharp. "I figured you'd tell me when it mattered." He reached into his coat, pulling out a small glass orb. Inside, a photograph, faded, but clear enough to show a woman with dark eyes and a crooked smile. "My sister," he said. "Lena. Genetic deterioration. Born without stable neural architecture. Earth had treatments. We ran out of credits." Alicia blinked, surprised. "You think the Snowblossom can cure her?" "I think it's the only thing I haven't tried," he replied, gaze distant. "They say it grants clarity, renewal, life. I don't know if it's true, but when you're desperate, legends start to sound like lifelines." She stared at the fire. "You believe in that much love?" He nodded. "It's the only thing that ever gave me strength. The only thing I ever fought for without being paid." There was a silence, then Alicia spoke, almost to herself. "My mother died in a corridor like this, buried under war. My father spent the next decade shaping me into a weapon." She looked at Caden. "They call it a crown, but it's just another cage." He didn't interrupt. "I've fought, bled, and sacrificed because I thought it meant something. But lately, I wonder who I am without the throne." "Maybe that's the point," Caden said gently. "You don't have to be anyone for anyone else. Just be you, and see what survives." She didn't respond. But that night, when she lay awake beneath a blanket of synthetic insulation, staring at the icy ceiling of the world, Alicia didn't think of war, or duty, or vengeance. She thought of a flower, and what it might mean to finally bloom. The moment Alicia and Caden stepped off the crawler and into the southern gates of Estrella, they sensed something was wrong. Too quiet. Not the respectful silence of a capital mourning its dead, but a taut, calculated stillness, like a blade held just behind your neck. The outer sentries didn't salute. The patrol schedules were inconsistent. Worse still, the gate's biometric lock system had been tampered with. Subtle, almost invisible, but to someone like Caden, unmistakable. "Someone's been rewriting access logs," he murmured, eyes narrowing as he inspected the control terminal. And not just anyone, this was done from the inside. Alicia's stomach tightened. The anomalies cascaded from there. Defense drones that should have been patrolling the city's northern ridge were discovered clustered in storage, disabled, their memory cores wiped. Communications towers showed signal reroutes, suggesting private transmissions had been piggybacked through military channels. Someone had used the very veins of the capital to siphon its blood without notice. The first to detect the irregularities was Lieutenant Orion, a systems tech barely out of cadet rank. His report, nervously delivered to Alicia and Caden over trembling hands, listed nearly a dozen breaches, all within the last 12 days, all pointing to one horrifying conclusion. The enemy was not just at the gates. They had been invited in. A council meeting was convened immediately. "We must launch a full internal investigation," Alicia said, standing before the chamber, voice unwavering. The response was ice cold. Advisor Tilia frowned. "And who shall lead it, Your Highness?" "Investigate whom? Ourselves?" Minister Halwyn scoffed. "The people are already afraid. Do you wish to sow chaos within the palace as well?" Caden stood beside her, silent but watchful. General Corps offered a compromise, an intelligence audit, controlled, contained, sanitized. Names were thrown about, but only from the outer ranks. A border commander with gambling debts, a comms operator with a Valakari cousin. Easy targets. No one dared speak the most obvious suspect. No one, except Alicia, though she said nothing aloud. That night, in the solitude of her private chamber, she opened the encrypted archives herself, cross-referenced transmission patterns with access logs, reviewed every authorization granted in the last 2 weeks, and a name kept appearing. Nisia Velen, her oldest friend, her confidant since childhood, royal archivist, trusted with the palace's internal systems, keeper of secrets. It couldn't be Nisia, but it could. Alicia recalled the strange way Nisia had hesitated during their last conversation, the way she'd averted her eyes when asked about troop movements, the too casual comment about perhaps ending the war another way. The pieces didn't fit cleanly, not yet, but they rattled, loudly. Alicia stared at the mirror, her own reflection hardened by doubt. To suspect a traitor in the ranks was one thing. To suspect Nisia, the girl who once held her hand when her sister's coffin passed, who shared her first blade lesson, who swore never to leave her side. That was something else entirely. It wasn't just betrayal of the crown, it was betrayal of the heart. And Alicia wasn't sure which wound would be deeper. It should have been a decisive strike. Swift, surgical, untraceable. Alicia had spent weeks drafting Operation Seraph, a maneuver designed to cut off Valakar's supply convoys by targeting their underground drone foundry in the Garan Rift. Only 6 people knew the details. All of them handpicked, trusted, bound by blood oath. Yet as their assault force approached the drop zone under cloak, Valakar units were already waiting. Turrets emerged from beneath false snow. Mines, precise in pattern and placement, detonated just outside their estimated approach. A sniper, perched at the perfect angle, fired 3 rounds, one missing Caden's head by an inch, the other 2 hitting a corporal and Lieutenant Orion, nearly killing both. Caden managed to reroute the squad through a decoy ravine and extract them with a smokescreen. But it wasn't a battle. It was an ambush. Someone had spoken. Later, back at HQ, Caden stood over the map table, fists pressed against the glass. There's no way they could have known this unless someone fed them the plan. Exact coordinates, troop count, entry timing. Alicia's voice was a whisper. And only my council and Nisia knew. He looked up sharply. Nisia? She maintains the archive systems. She encrypts the briefings. She stopped. She didn't want it to be true. But the pieces were already falling. That night, Alicia summoned Nisia to the old council chamber, the one left unused since her father died. The room was dim, lit only by the blue flame of a single floating ember lamp. The floor still bore the scuffs from a forgotten war. Ghosts lived in these walls. Nisia entered in silence, her expression unreadable. Her long blonde hair was tied back, archivist robes spotless, posture calm. "You asked for me?" she said. Alicia stood alone, hands clasped behind her back, her voice low and steady. "There was a leak in Operation Seraph. Only 6 of us knew. You weren't one of them. Officially, Nisia blinked. Then why? You prepared the transmission archives. You know who accessed what, and you had top-level keys passed from my father. I would never betray. Don't lie to me. That cracked something. Nisia's face hardened. She looked away. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Alicia stepped forward. Then how was it supposed to go? There was a long pause. Then finally, Nisia exhaled, defeated. They promised peace, a world without you on the throne. The silence turned colder. They, Alicia asked, Valakar's diplomats, months ago, they said if I helped them, if I gave them just enough, they'd force a truce, end the war. You'd step down. I'd be free. Free from what? Alicia asked, stunned. From you, Nisia spat, voice cracking. From always being the shadow, the whisper, the friend, the footnote. You got the sword, the speeches, the crown. I got silence. Her breathing was ragged now. Anger and something deeper. Years of it. I loved you, she said bitterly, but you never even saw me. Alicia's voice trembled, not from fear. You risked my life, my people. For jealousy? No, Nisia said, for justice. My version of it. Caden entered then, summoned by the guards outside. He saw Nisia's tears, Alicia's clenched jaw, the space between two people who once trusted each other with everything. And Nisia, she didn't beg, didn't fall to her knees. She stood tall, hands bound, eyes burning. Do what you will, she whispered, but I don't regret it. Alicia didn't speak, because something inside her had already shattered. Nisia knelt in the inner chamber of Estrella's northern keep, hands shackled, eyes bloodshot, but silent. No screams, no pleas. Just that same glassy defiance, like she knew what she was and had already made peace with it. Elijah watched her from the dais above, cloaked in royal black, the room lit by soft torchlight flickering off ancient stone. General Kor stood to her right, Caden to her left. Execution orders sat signed but unsealed in her hand. Give the word, Kor said. Make an example of her. But Alicia didn't. Not yet. She looked at Caden. He said nothing at first, then offered, killing her now gives us nothing. But keeping her alive, that sends a different kind of message. To who? Kor scoffed. The traitors? To everyone, Caden replied. It says the crown isn't afraid to confront rot and learn from it. That was the difference. Alicia knew it. The difference between vengeance and strategy. She turned away from Nisia. Take her to the high cells, restrict contact, no execution. Kor objected, but she silenced him with a single glance. It wasn't mercy, it was control. And from that moment, Alicia became more than a warrior. She became something far more dangerous, a tactician. With Nisia behind bars, Alicia and Caden poured over what remained of Operation Seraph. They mapped every fault, every failure. Then they broke tradition. Your military is designed for honor battles, Caden said, drawing symbols in light on a digital slate. Lines, shields, hierarchies. That works if the enemy plays fair. They don't, Alicia muttered. Exactly, which is why we fight like they don't. He taught her about asymmetrical warfare, a Terran method that emphasized deception, mobility, and psychological dominance. Small, mobile units striking from impossible angles. Precision sabotage. Propaganda. On Panka, where cities rose from mountains and deserts swallowed entire platoons, it could work. Because it wasn't a war of numbers anymore. It was a war of stories. But they'll call it dishonorable, Alicia warned. Only if we lose. Still, the strategy wasn't without risks. Thinly stretched supply lines. The danger of rogue units misreading intel. Civilian panic if psychological ops were mishandled. It was a gamble. But Alicia was done playing safe. Before launching the campaign, she stepped onto the Citadel's central platform, where the old monarchs once declared wars and ended them. Thousands gathered in the square below. Soldiers, civilians. The broken, the hopeful. Her voice echoed through crystal amplifiers. Today I speak not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as a daughter who lost a sister, as a friend betrayed, And as a soldier who nearly died for a lie, murmurs rippled. I will not ask you to forget your grief. I will not pretend we are unshaken, but we are still here. That is our defiance. That is our strength. She paused, letting the silence settle like dust. We do not fight for vengeance. We fight because this world is ours, and no outsider, no traitor, no empire will decide who we become. There were tears, from soldiers hardened by fire, from children clutching their mothers. Even Kor bowed his head. Later that night, Caden stood beside her on the balcony, watching the fires of resolve catch across the city. You speak like a queen, he said. She turned toward him. Maybe it's time I stopped waiting for a crown to give me permission. The message arrived hidden inside a rusted maintenance drone, the kind long decommissioned after the border wars. It rolled to the edge of the outpost's hangar, sputtered twice, then emitted a short-range burst transmission. Caden intercepted it by accident, tinkering with radar frequencies. What he found chilled him. The encryption was old, outdated by a decade, but he cracked it. A voice recording, gritty, distorted. Caden, if you're hearing this, I don't have much time. It's Rowan Vass. Caden blinked. That name hadn't surfaced in years. Rowan Vass, former head of Epsilon's Black Division, a secretive intelligence group disbanded after a scandal involving illegal subterfuge on neutral planets. Officially, he'd been declared dead after a shuttle accident near the Iron Belt. But here he was, alive, and warning them. Valakar isn't working alone. There's a hand behind their power, something buried inside Estrella itself, someone high, too high. And if you're hearing this, it means I couldn't stop it. Then silence. No coordinates, no signatures. But it was enough. Caden didn't take it to the council, not even to Alicia. Not yet. He needed proof. 2 nights later, under the veil of a crimson moon, he stole a scout suit, a Valakari exoskin recovered from a prior skirmish. Using its adaptive camouflage and neural relay implants, he mimicked the gait and biorhythm of a hybrid field engineer. He crossed into enemy territory alone. The Valakari camp sprawled across the desolate fields of Dravath's basin, where the land cracked like sun's split bone. Watchtowers pulsed blue light. Drones buzzed overhead, but no alarms sounded. Inside, Caden moved quickly. Data cores, weapon stockpiles, command tents. But what he found buried beneath the main dome wasn't weaponry. It was a communication link, a live data relay feeding encrypted signals to beyond the Penkin system. He tapped into a feed, and there it was, a face. Not Valakari, not even humanoid. Smooth white skin, no mouth, black glass eyes, a voice that spoke in vibrations, translated by synthetic overlay. Project Apex Phi. First phase, destabilize Epsilon. Second phase, absorption. Third, erasure. Valakar wasn't the architect. They were the scalpel, and Epsilon. Just the first incision. Other targets were listed. Seldros, Varelian Prime, Malketh Nanarmiri Urti, all critical points on the outer galactic trade ring. If those fell, the new power behind Valakar would sever the galaxy's arteries. But why start with Epsilon? Because it was symbolic, ancient, resilient, a kingdom that had never bowed, never fractured. Its fall would echo, not just politically, but psychologically. It would make resistance elsewhere seem hopeless. Caden downloaded what he could, then planted a viral bug into their relay system. Subtle, timed to fracture their next long-range burst. On the way out, he ran into a Valakari patrol. 5 soldiers, 1 hybrid. He dropped 2 before they noticed. The third he took down with a blade to the throat. The 4th clipped his shoulder with a pulse round. The 5th, Caden didn't remember, only that he woke hours later, bloody, frostbitten, dragging himself toward the Epsilonian line with a data core wrapped in a broken arm. When Alicia saw him at the gates, barely standing, her face drained of color. "You idiot," she whispered, catching him before he collapsed. He handed her the core. "They're not who we think they are." And for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Not for herself, for everything. The war room was silent, not in defeat, but in dread. Alicia stood at the central console, eyes fixed on the holographic projections of incoming fleets. 3 Valakari armadas were en route, 2 from orbit, 1 from the basin. Civilians still crowded the lower cities. Evacuation was mathematically impossible in under 12 hours. "We can either hold the capital," said General Corps, "or withdraw and save the people, but not both." The line was clear, stark, cold. Alicia's lips barely moved. "And if we abandon Estrella, we lose the seat, the crown." "Yes," Corps confirmed, "but we keep Epsilon breathing." It was Advisor Talia, cool-eyed, practical, who finally said what no one else would. "Your Highness, perhaps it is time to step down." The words hit harder than cannon fire. "You suggest abdication?" Alicia whispered. "I suggest survival," Talia replied. "Symbols can be rebuilt. Lives cannot." Across the room, Caden watched her, eyes narrowed, unreadable. She looked at him as if expecting betrayal, but instead he said calmly, "You can still lead, with or without a throne." Her gaze faltered. "It's all I've ever known." "Then maybe it's time to know something else." Later, alone beneath the fractured skylight of the observatory, Caden told her the truth. "I wasn't always a mercenary," he began. "I was Command Officer 3rd Class, Orbital Division, Earth Unified Forces." Alicia tilted her head. "On Titan during the collapse of the Helix Rebellion," he continued, "we were ordered to level the southern arcology. High Command said the enemy had taken control. Said we had no time." Her expression hardened. "And did they?" Caden's voice dropped. "No, it was a refugee camp. 10,000 people." She didn't speak, didn't flinch. "I gave the order, and when it was over, I walked away, took off my rank, burned my ID, and never looked back." The air between them went still. Alicia, voice soft but unshaken, finally said, "Then maybe the question isn't what you did, but what you do now." She didn't turn away. She didn't judge. She simply stood with him, and that made the next decision easier, or at least clearer. "There is one option left," Caden said, activating a secret schematic on his wrist console. The hologram revealed an ancient structure beneath the capital, forgotten even by the council, a circular chamber buried 2 kilometers below the palace foundation. "The Singularity Gate," he explained, "an energy well built by the founders during Epsilon's first colonization cycle." Alicia stared. "That's a myth." "No," Caden replied. "It's a weapon, or a signal, or both. It's why Valakar started here. They know it exists. That's why they want the city intact." "Who forbade its use?" she asked. "Your great-grandmother. She sealed it after it nearly tore a rift into the planet's crust. Said it wasn't meant for this era. What happens if we open it?" Caden looked her dead in the eyes. "No one knows." That was the truth. But so was this. If they stayed the current course, they'd lose everything. So they made the choice, together, to awaken what was buried, to gamble a kingdom on a mystery, and pray that the dead had not locked it away in vain. They came at dawn, again, but this time with everything. The Valakari last wave rose like a storm from the east, 30,000 strong, darkening the desert horizon with the hum of war mechs, genetically engineered skirmish beasts, and plasma-sheathed shock troops. At their head stood the new warlord, Rylan Vex, a being neither man nor machine. Caden recognized him instantly. "Rylan," he muttered, cold washing over him. "You know him?" Alicia asked as they stood in the lower Citadel command deck. "Used to, before he sold his soul for immortality." Rylan Vex had once been a captain in the Terran Vanguard, same division as Caden. But after the Titan massacre, he vanished. Rumors said he'd joined Merc groups, then Black Labs. Eventually, he'd become a prototype, part synthetic, part mind-networked tactical AI, no longer needing sleep or remorse. Now he led the final push on Epsilon. Valakar was betting everything. They deployed Oblivion-class nanocrawlers, machines that dissolved metal and flesh on contact, beam snare mortars capable of tethering mid-air artillery, units that scream not to signal attack, but to collapse morale with frequency-based psychological warfare. The outer wall fell within an hour, the east gate within 2. "Split the command," Elijah ordered. I'll take the front. You sure? Caden asked. You'll be more use down there. She nodded toward the core chamber. The gate. She stood atop the bulwark, armor scorched, voice ringing through the storm. To every soul still standing, this is our hour. We do not hold the wall. We are the wall. Caden disappeared below, into the old city's deepest rudy, where the gate of Sarah pulsed behind a layered vault of fused crystal and steel. The device was not a weapon in the traditional sense. Its internal mechanics, according to ancient schematics, bent consciousness fields. It didn't destroy matter. It unraveled intent. Raylan's forces pushed deeper. Command points were overrun. Alicia's left flank collapsed when a sonic charge vaporized an entire trench. Her shoulder dislocated. She kept fighting. Caden wired into the gate's relay nodes. 32 contact points that had to be calibrated in sequence. Any mistake, and the entire underground layer might implode. His hands bled. Sparks flew. One misfire shorted a core and sent a jolt through his ribcage. But he kept going. At minute 34, Alicia's command fell to half strength. At minute 36, the palace's power grid failed. And at minute 37, Caden activated the final relay. The gate bloomed. No light, no heat, just presence. A pulse radiated outward, not of sound, but intention. Every living thing within a 6-kilometer radius felt it, a sudden weightlessness in the mind. Soldiers dropped weapons mid-charge. Hybrid beasts shrieked and turned away. Raylan Vex stumbled, the glow in his chest plate flickering. What is this? He hissed, eyes wide. In the command center, Alicia stared at the battlefield. Troops who had once screamed for her blood now knelt in the dust, holding their heads, as if overwhelmed by something larger than fear or even understanding. They're stopping, whispered General Core. They're just stopping. The gate didn't kill. It revealed a raw universal signal, not of hate or dominance, but truth. It stripped away purpose from those whose purpose had been built on lies, stripped illusion from war, and in its place left silence. Raylan turned and fled, his systems flickering in disarray. Valakar collapsed without him. Some soldiers ran, others sat. A few wept, none fought. And Alicia, armor cracked, body aching, raised her voice to the stunned remnants of her people. Today we did not win with fire. We won with memory, with will, with something no enemy can ever replicate, the soul of Epsilon. For the first time in generations, the city was truly still. The prison was carved from stone, not steel, old like everything under Estrella. No digital locks, no surveillance drones, just quiet, cold walls that remembered too much. Elijah walked the corridor alone. The war was over. Valakar was broken. The gate had been sealed again, its hum fading into myth once more. The streets of the capital sang with rebuilding, with hope. But she still had one thing left to face before she could call any of it peace. Nisha sat behind rusted bars, thinner now, eyes shadowed, wrists chained but no longer trembling. She looked up as Alicia approached, and for the first time since the trial, she spoke first. You didn't come to kill me? No, Alicia said, voice calm. I came to ask if you remember why we became friends. Nisha smiled bitterly. I remember everything. There was a long silence between them, heavier than chains. You gave them everything, Alicia said. And yet, I'm still here. I didn't want you dead, Nisha said quietly. I just wanted you smaller, more human. I always was, Alicia replied. You just chose not to see it. When she turned to leave, Nisha stood. So what now? Forgiveness? Alicia stopped at the door. I forgive you, she said, but that doesn't mean I trust you, and it doesn't mean we go back. Then what does it mean? It means I don't let you own any more of me. And then she was gone. The mountain winds had returned to Estrella, cold but clean. Beneath the Citadel Gardens, in a sealed greenhouse restored from the Founder era, a single flower stood in bloom, white petals edged with blue frost, impossibly delicate, alive in the cold. The Snowblossom. Caden stood over it, eyebrows raised. That's it? That's it, Alicia confirmed, stepping beside him. He blinked. It's just a flower. Yes, no power, no cure, no miracle. Caden exhaled, then laughed. I nearly died for a glorified ice tulip. She reached down, plucked it gently, and held it out to him. You didn't come for power, she said. You came for hope. That was the miracle. He took it, fingers brushing hers. So what now? He asked. Now, Alicia said, we stop carrying the weight of things that never belonged to us. They left the capital a week later. Alicia gave the crown to a civilian council. Elected, balanced, unarmed. Some objected. Others wept. But none dared question her resolve. Caden left behind his weapons, save for one small blade tucked in his boot, just in case. Their destination was a place not marked on any map. A quiet island on Epsilon's third moon. A place where no wars had ever been fought. No history, no legends. Just sky, forest, and silence. Why here? Caden asked as they stepped off the shuttle. Alicia smiled. Because no one will follow. And we finally get to be people. Not titles. And so they were. A woman once built for command. A man once built to destroy. Now simply two hearts who had survived what others didn't, and who chose finally to live. In the end, Alicia and Caden chose not power, not vengeance, but peace, a life unshaped by titles or scars. Their journey teaches us that the greatest victories are not won on battlefields, but within ourselves, in the courage to forgive, to hope, and to begin again. Even the smallest flower, blooming in the cold, can remind us that light exists beyond war, beyond betrayal. And sometimes walking away is not surrender. It is the bravest act of all.